Why do emotionally vulnerable people get hurt quickly? Now, if you're somebody who is sensitive, highly sensitive, energetically sensitive, psychic, or even empathic, this topic might really open your eyes, especially if you feel very deeply. You keep having bouts of sudden emotions. Your family members, friends, and colleagues criticize you for being emotionally reactive, or you feel as though you're somebody who's different. You don't fit in the normal, if there is even a normal, but the traditional or orthodox setting of the world that we live in, wherein people don't express themselves fully. And here you are, who are very expressive and feel different emotions very deeply, very intensely, and very frequently, and don't know why you feel that way or why you are made this way. And today we are going to dive into as to why people who are emotionally vulnerable are gifted, because of which they feel differently, feel deeply, feel intensely, and can be misunderstood, and also few tips as to what you can do about it. Right? So, if you're excited, make sure you grab a cup of tea and pause this video once it goes into a video mode. But otherwise, grab a cup of tea quickly and join me in learning about your emotional vulnerability. Right. What is emotional vulnerability? Let's first touch base upon that, right? A lot of us, okay, and I will apologize because I have made this mistake in my initial years as a child or maybe even a teenager, where I would call myself as somebody who was cranky, and people around me looked at me as somebody who's very sensitive, who has a lot of mood problems. And one minute I would feel happy, the other minute I would feel sad, and often my sadness would revolve under having low self-esteem and thoughts and emotions about myself that were not healthy and that were very critical, right? So, if you're somebody who's had a similar childhood, just wanted to assure you that I've had a similar childhood, and many emotionally vulnerable people have childhoods where they have been criticized either directly or indirectly to for being emotionally either expressive or not being able to express themselves, or having too many emotions, or having emotions that come out in different ways but very frequently. Uh, Now, not everybody who is emotionally vulnerable necessarily displays that, right? There could be many people, as adults or children, who could be emotionally vulnerable, have a lot of emotional expression that's needed, but they wouldn't necessarily express themselves, right? They would feel as though I don't need to, right? Especially if you're the elder child, already are born as a responsible person, like a responsible adult in a child's body, maybe. And you might feel as though I am okay, right? I'm functioning all right. I don't need to express myself. And you might feel as though there are better things to do. I need to maybe if you're somebody who is very highly sensitive, you might feel like you're in a caregiver role even when you're a child, right? I remember when I was a kid and my parents would fight, I would take on the responsibility to sort of heal their relationship. And I remember writing a letter when my mom and dad were fighting, and they were in two different rooms because they had fought or something of that sort. Um, I hope I'm not making it more dramatic than it was, but this is my memory of it, recollection of it. And I remember writing a letter on behalf of my mom to my dad, and then on behalf of my dad to my mom, and making sure they sort of made up. And that was my attempt of taking responsibility for their fight And I felt so guilty. I also felt responsible for them fighting, even though it was nothing about me, right? It was they were just having an argument about something, and I was there. And because I was emotionally vulnerable, I felt all those emotions and I felt responsible, and I felt as though I need to do something about this. And when I did, it still didn't feel all right. I felt still anxious. I still felt like sad and really emotionally heavy. And a lot of times, emotionally vulnerable people can feel that way. Just so many emotions pumping up, you feel heavy, right? Even now, when I'm speaking, right, I feel the need to hold on to my chest, like put my hand on my chest, because it's bringing so many emotions within me. And because I am a vulnerable person, it is almost a little, although there's a big smile on my face, and that's because I think my YouTube sort of practice for YouTube, over practice for YouTube, I don't know. But I think that's how I am. I put on a smile on my face all the time. But from the inside, I could be going through a lot of emotional turmoil. And that's another thing. Emotionally vulnerable people don't have to feel the need quite inherently to showcase their emotions on their face. Uh, but doesn't mean that they're not having a bad day, or it doesn't mean that they're not going through a lot either, right? Uh, and there are some emotionally vulnerable people for whom it is more easier to express their emotions quite openly. So people who sort of cry very easily, or can express their anger very easily, or can express other shades of emotions as well, right? Like even happiness. But when, say, you feel happy for somebody, but you're also very touched or very emotional about it, it's a happy moment, and you really love that person, you might feel like you're having happy tears, and that comes out very naturally or easily. Especially happy tears. I've seen a lot of emotionally vulnerable people for whom having happy tears is very easy. Like this, they can have happy tears. Uh, and these people, I think it's an ability to cry at the drop of a hat, and an ability to emote very easily. Because for a lot of us, emoting is not easy. We have to go through sort of barriers, we have to break through barriers to come to a point where we can emotionally express ourselves, especially if it's a emotion that's very strong, and sort of is hard to even hold in our physical body, right? So these are the two types of emotionally vulnerable people. And third type is people who are violent. Now, I know this might come across as a surprise, but there are emotionally vulnerable people who are so vulnerable in the sense um, they're affected or impacted by anger or rage or revenge to the point that they act violently or vengefully, or could play sort of mind games. And these people who are invested in the mafias, or like just like really uh, people who aren't good, right? The brain works very differently, and their heart works very differently. But nevertheless, they could be also emotionally vulnerable or emotionally sensitive, because they might feel the rage and anger and the need for revenge to probably a great extent, which is why it makes them feel the need to be violent, right? So many a times when we say, oh my god, that guy lost his control and sort of hit somebody, or that girl lost control and yelled at somebody, or did something that was sort of under the umbrella of crime, it's because they did not know how to cope with anger, envy, or jealousy, revenge. That's also an emotion. And I would say that is also emotional vulnerability. Uh, so I think these are the three categories. Now we are going to micro focus today on the category of what do you do when you're emotionally vulnerable but can't express? Because I think that's an arena that's my favorite, because it's easier to emote when it's easy for you, it's like natural for you. But I think for people who are emotionally vulnerable but cannot express themselves, it becomes difficult. And we have to talk about why do emotionally vulnerable people, especially who can't express themselves, get hurt more easily, right? And we, and I'm guilty of it, uh, we sort of classify people as introverts and extroverts. And I have had the privilege to be an introvert uh, the first 25, 26 years of my life. And then I went abroad to study. And as a survival mechanism, I just had to talk my way out of everything. There weren't my parents who could do anything for me and do the talking. So I had to sort of build a life by being socially active. And that sort of made me an extrovert. I really started enjoying it. I started meeting people and chit chatting, learning about their life, telling about my life, sharing about what I did, and just having new experiences, right? And I felt that the whole um, sort of introvertedness started fading away from me. Uh, but I feel as though categorizing emotionally vulnerable people as introverts or extroverts sort of is quite controversial, according to me. But we'll get to that some other day. Today, we will talk about why is it that uh, emotionally vulnerable people are accused of feeling hurt very easily. I remember, here's a story from my childhood. When I was younger, I remember I would sort of be quiet about most things and then express to my parents. And I would go into these rooms of family dining, family dinners, and stuff, or even like birthday parties with friends. The focus on me because I could not express myself. And I know that a lot of the times we are projecting, but and that could be true. I could have been projecting that on people, but I did feel as though people were taking digs at me because I could not express myself, and I would feel so hurt. And I remember once writing letters to my parents. I was I'm gonna say left and abandoned, but that's just me being a kid. But I was spending the summer at my uncle's house, and my parents were back at my home in a different city, and I did not want to stay there. I did not like it. So I started writing letters to my parents, and I started putting it in a box. And then later I got to know that my uncle was reading it, and I got so hurt. Uh, and it made me feel like really bad. And I did not know how to express myself. It almost felt I was constipated in different parts of my body. And it felt as though I had so many emotions and I wanted to express them. But all I felt like was dying from within, like as a kid, this is, and as though I was fully exposed and that my emotions were not safe. Uh, and that led me to, I think that really left a mark in my psyche. If I'm speaking about it, must have. And it made me realize, or made me feel, then my emotions, it's not safe to express myself. And this is as somebody who already doesn't express themselves. I felt very hurt. Now, when you share the story with a lot of people, most of them would feel like, oh, that's funny. Especially if they're not emotionally aware. Maybe people who are emotionally aware wouldn't, they would empathize, but people who are not emotionally aware or they're not high on emotional intelligence, they would feel like, oh, that's just like a childhood experience, we all have these experiences and we all go through this, it's okay, sort of a thing. But it's not okay. And you end up developing sort of defensive attitude towards expressing our emotions because of such incidents. And then when you're already emotionally vulnerable, it becomes challenging to tell ourselves that it's safe to feel our emotions and express our emotions. And I empathize with people who have gone through childhoods where it was difficult to get acknowledgement from parents, family members uh, for their emotions. I think it's very important if there's somebody who's emotionally vulnerable, for their parents, for their siblings, to have talks with them about emotions in general. And this is so it infuriates me from within, but it's also like, what are we going to do about this? Very recently, I went and did a training in my dad's workplace, and he works in an MNC. And I was giving a presentation and a talk about high sensitivity in the workforce, and there were about 25 to 30 people who were a part of it. And when I said today we're going to talk about emotions, one of them, an adult, maybe over 35, said that makes me uncomfortable. And I was like, wow, if an adult age 35 can say that, what are we going to do about our children? And when we don't educate our children about emotional awareness or emotions or emotional vulnerability, we grow up as adults who have problems expressing ourselves, and we end up feeling a lot more. And it becomes like a cycle. We are emotionally vulnerable, we feel many emotions, we can't express them. Again, we're emotionally vulnerable because of that. Again, we feel more, like 10x more, can't express that. Keeps going on. And that 10x becomes 100x, and then we feel like bursting. Right? So, why do emotionally vulnerable people feel hurt? Now, a lot of emotionally vulnerable people can be highly sensitive. Now, I'm not generalizing it, but I speak a lot about high sensitivity because I'm a highly sensitive person and I coach highly sensitive people. And it makes me feel as though when we don't talk about emotional vulnerability in regards to high sensitivity, we are not doing justice to the topic of either emotional vulnerability or highly sensitive people. So when we are emotionally vulnerable, we could be highly sensitive, which means that we are made differently. Our nervous system is created to be a different kind of a nervous system. Our emotional body, our energy body, is more porous. At least our energy body is. Not quite sure about our emotional body, but we have a different nervous system which makes us respond to stimuli very differently. And we are more aware, right? When we enter a public space and we are highly sensitive, and we have somebody who's not highly sensitive. The person who is highly sensitive is aware of, say, 20 things or 10 things, and the person who is not highly sensitive would be aware of 5 things at one given point. And when we are aware of more things, we're feeling all the stimuli in our body. If we don't have boundaries set, and if we don't know how to cope with sensitivity, all types, energetic, emotional, psychic, cognitive, right? And when we don't have these boundaries, all the emotions, energy, thoughts we absorb from the stimuli, whether the people, objects, spaces, goes straight into our body, straight into our energy field, and we start developing emotions, right? So if you enter a public space where everybody is depressed, even though if you're in a happy mood and you enter that space, you feel like, oh my God, I need to take a nap. I'm feeling suddenly sad, sick, etc. You start recollecting stuff from your life that was really sad. A breakup, maybe a failure, maybe you failed in an exam. Start recollecting all of that. Makes you feel all the more sad. And why does this happen? Because we don't have boundaries. And emotionally vulnerable people get hurt because A, they care about things a lot, and B, they might not have boundaries set that inhibit others' emotions, energy, or thoughts to get through. And they can be highly empathetic as well. In fact, if you watch the video, I'll link it to the description of this video, and you can also find it in the related video of this link to this video. I have made a video about 10 signs to learn about, to recognize whether or not you're highly sensitive. If you go through those 10 signs, you'll realize emotional vulnerability comes from a place of empathy, compassion, and sensitivity, energetic sensitivity towards oneself and others. So it's a gift. And we keep criticizing ourselves for being a certain way, for having the ability to feel so many emotions, or one emotion or two emotions, but at different frequencies, or in different degrees, or of different shades. Right. So it's important to look at emotional vulnerability, especially if you're a highly sensitive person, as a gift, as an ability. And then when you do embrace it, you realize that you can utilize it to your benefit because it's a form of intelligence. I love being smart. I really adore people who are smart and cognitively gifted and scientifically gifted. But emotional awareness, emotional sensitivity, emotional vulnerability is also a form of intelligence that we sort of ignore, neglect, or worse, feel scared of, criticize. Right? And when we are criticizing somebody's emotional vulnerability, we are actually telling ourselves, I don't really value my emotions either. Right? So if you're somebody who's emotionally vulnerable and has received a lot of criticism for being emotionally vulnerable, I'd just like to say that the person who has criticized you is somebody who does not value their emotions. And this has happened to me in my life, where especially with coaches, fortunately I'm a coach and a healer, and it's sad that this happens, where I used to be so scared because I did not know how to set emotional boundaries. And I was energetically sensitive, I still am, but I did not know how to set energetic boundaries. And I was always in a state of overwhelm and stimulation. And when I would go and tell the coaches with a lot of emotions, they would get overwhelmed and they would not respond well. They were very critical of me. And it's really sad that somebody who's in a position of a coach cannot recognize the gift that emotional vulnerability is, be deny acknowledgement of somebody's emotions, especially somebody who's trying to work through them. And many of us face that challenge. I think many of us these days are aware of our emotional vulnerability and we want to do something about it. But still, I think we miss having people in our life who truly value it, can help us with it. So I think when it comes to emotional vulnerability, feeling all those emotions is not the problem. Feeling hurt is also not the problem. It's a challenge. It's a result of not being able to set boundaries, or not being able to understand oneself fully, or being in the wrong relationships or situations. But I think the bigger problem probably is, and it's like a circle, is when we don't find the right people, we will be criticized and we are looking for a response, sort of a good, acceptable response from the same people. And that keeps going on and on and on. So the solution here is to find a different set of people who actually value your emotional vulnerability and make you realize it's not really a problem, it's a gift. So I hope that today you recognize, if you are somebody who is highly sensitive or emotionally vulnerable, that you being gifted with emotions or feeling deeply is something that you must rejoice in. And secondly, that you might want to work on boundaries and accepting and embracing your emotional vulnerability. Because I feel that emotional vulnerability can be a beautiful experience. I remember when I was younger, I would have so many emotions that I would have my different personality traits would come out very easily. Unfortunately, as an adult, although it's much better now, still I'm working at it, there are barriers for me to express all my emotions. Like, I don't think I can cry as much as I used to as a child now, which is, I don't think is a positive quality. I don't think it's a good thing. Because I feel crying is really healthy when you do it in the right sort of way without being a self-deprecating manner. It's healthy. I don't think I can do that now. And I don't think it's a good thing at all. I think it's a loss for my being to not be able to cry as openly as I used to as a child. So if you're somebody who feels like crying and you're watching this video, wow, you're lucky. Because even today, there is some effort that I have to put in to cry, to allow myself to tell myself that it's okay to cry. And if you're somebody who is in a position of a leader, or somebody who takes sort of responsibility for other people, might be even more hard for you to cry. I don't want to assume, but I think it just because you're always thinking about how can I help others. It could be difficult to initiate a And if you're somebody who's emotionally vulnerable and can cry very easily, how lucky are you? I genuinely envy the fact that you can cry at a drop of a hat. Because that means you process your emotions. I remember I used to follow a Buddhist path called Vipassana. And this path involved me to stay in a center with other people for like 10 days, but we couldn't speak. So we had to meditate for 10 days and we weren't allowed to speak. That was a big part of it. And remember one day, in the middle of the 10 days, I think on the 4th or 5th or the last day, one of those days, I had a big breakdown. And I just cried, right? And I went to the teacher there, and the teacher said, you can cry for 5 minutes, but then after that, don't feel guilty, just stop. Otherwise, you'll fall into a habit of feeling bad about yourself. Is it a wise suggestion? To an extent, yes. I think over-crying can also make us feel victimized. But now I have a different perspective. I think if you're somebody who takes responsibility for yourself or your life, I think you should cry as much as you want to. Because sometimes that's the best medicine. And people might not understand that. People might criticize you for it. Or you might not understand yourself for it. Or you might criticize yourself for it. That doesn't mean it's wrong. And I hope you begin to look at it in that way. So I hope that you got a glimpse into emotional vulnerability, why you should not criticize yourself if you're emotionally vulnerable. What are the 3 types of emotionally vulnerable people according to me? By the way, that was not scientifically backed. I just want to emphasize that. It's just something that I've observed in my life. And I wanted to cover what you can do if you're emotionally vulnerable to support yourself. But we don't have the time. We're already crossed 30 minutes. But I did mention setting boundaries and setting not just energetic boundaries, but also emotional boundaries is very important. And that's the primary solution to not feel so deeply or so harshly that it affects your day-to-day functioning. And if you're somebody who's interested in learning more about emotional vulnerability, highly sensitive people, and tools to cope with your vulnerability and sensitivity, please do like, share, subscribe to my channel. Check out all the content that's already there. Might give you some ideas as to how you can support yourself. And if you're somebody who's looking for a coach, one-on-one support, please feel free to book a private paid call with me using the link in my YouTube channel bio. I cater to clients globally and I charge $500 per hour. And I assure you that whether you need a coach or not, please know that you're always capable to embrace your emotions, whether or not it feels like you can or not. By the way, I don't think I introduced myself. Hi, my name is Pranita Rao. I am a coach and a healer for highly sensitive people. I work with tools like Reiki, intuitive abstract art, angelic healing, and also nature spirits. And I also have two other YouTube channels. One of it is called The Unicorn Way. It's about unicorn spirit guides. And the other channel is about trees, nature healing, channeling Reiki from nature. And I channel Reiki from nature, from trees, especially Celtic alder tree. And I also talk about tree guardians, having tree guardians and connecting to them. That channel is called Tree Babble. The links for it are in the description of this video. Feel free to check them out, and if you resonate with all three of my channels, you're welcome to subscribe to all three of them and hang out. I also have 4 blogs. If you're a reader, you can get your education from there. I also talk about slow living, and one of the blogs is about slow living. I haven't done a video about slow living recently, but I will soon. Maybe tomorrow's live session, who knows. So show up if you'd like to learn more, stick around if you'd like to learn more, and definitely book a call with me if you'd like to learn. Once again, thank you for being here and spending almost 37 minutes with me out of your schedule. I hope that you are able to embrace your emotional vulnerability a little bit more, or I hope that you're able to embrace the emotional vulnerability of the people in your life whom you love. Thank you. Oh, lastly, I would like to thank my guides, my human guides, Billy and Musk, who have helped me to speak today, and also my angels who have helped me make this video. Once again, thank you, and I hope you have a great day ahead.